The ancient ruins of Baalbek in modern-day Lebanon might be the most compelling evidence of an advanced ancient civilization missing from our history books.
Beneath the blazing sun of Lebanon, where ancient dust clings to silent ruins, stands a site archaeologists thought they had finally understood. Baalbek, a name long buried under textbooks, shrugged off as Roman work, filed neatly into the past. But everything changed the moment new scans were taken beneath the stone. And what they revealed wasn't just unexpected, it was terrifying. Archaeologists are shaken. Data is being quietly buried. And the question no one wants to ask hangs in the air like a warning. This isn't just a discovery. It's a threat to everything we think we know about human civilization.
This monumental complex, with its immense megalithic stones, some weighing over 1,000 tons, defies any explanation through the lens of conventional archaeology.
Keep watching, because what lies beneath Baalbek is darker, older, and more impossible than anyone ever imagined. The site that refused to explain itself. If there is one location on Earth that does not merely challenge what we believe about history, but threatens to overturn the very foundation of our understanding of civilization, that place is Baalbek. At first glance, it appears like any other ancient ruin, a temple complex, weathered by time, surrounded by legends and monuments. Generations of historians confidently assigned it a label and moved on, placing it comfortably in the category of Roman achievements. They taught that the Romans, with their armies, their engineering brilliance, their organizational power, came here, quarried these stones, and built the great platform for the Temple of Jupiter. It was a narrative that fit neatly into textbooks, museum plaques, and academic lectures. It offered certainty, and because certainty is comforting, the world accepted it without looking any deeper. Yet certainty has a habit of dissolving, the moment reality is studied without assumptions. As the decades progressed, and as newer tools began probing ancient mysteries, Baalbek was forced to step forward from behind its protective cloak of unquestioned explanations. For the first time in modern memory, the stones themselves were measured, scanned, and studied, not as symbols of Roman legacy, but as physical evidence in a forensic investigation. And that was where the familiar story began to fracture. Because Baalbek is not simply old, it is impossible. Its existence forces a question that shakes our understanding of history at its root. How could a civilization that supposedly existed within the limits of ancient technology cut, move, and position stones that weigh as much as 800 tons, place them with millimeter precision, align them to a sky thousands of years older than Rome, and do all of this without leaving a single written record explaining how or why? When confronted with these facts, even the most conservative scholars quietly admit that Baalbek no longer sits safely within the timeline we have built for human civilization. It rises above it. It mocks it. It stands as a monument that does not speak, yet communicates a message that echoes across time. Someone, long before recorded history, possessed knowledge that we no longer understand. This video is not a journey through guesses or myths. It is the unfolding of evidence, evidence that refuses to obey our timeline and forces us to reconsider whether history is something we have been taught to memorize or something we have barely begun to uncover. The collapse of a confident story. For nearly 2 centuries, Baalbek existed under a veil of academic certainty. Archaeologists, historians, and scholars confidently declared that everything standing at the site belonged to Rome. Not only the columns and temples, but even the enormous foundational stones beneath them. The logic appeared airtight. Rome was the power of its age. Rome had tools. Rome had engineering. Rome had written records from almost every major project they completed. And so, when Baalbek entered the academic stage, the world accepted an explanation that required no discomfort and no new questions. Rome built it, they said, and the conversation ended there. But knowledge, like stone, shifts when pressure is applied. As research teams began studying Baalbek using modern engineering analysis, the comfortable narrative began to unravel. Tool marks carved into the foundational blocks, marks that should reveal the identity of the builders, did not resemble Roman chisels. They did not resemble Bronze Age or Iron Age tools. They did not resemble anything recognized within recorded human tradition. Physics tests revealed that known Roman transport methods, the rollers, the ropes, the sledges, could not move stones that weighed hundreds of tons across uneven terrain. The Romans, who documented their triumphs meticulously, who carved plaques to celebrate engineering victories, who wrote in detailed records about roads and bridges, failed to mention Baalbek at all. There is no Roman archive, no commemorative inscription, no engineering manual, no tool inventory that describes shaping or lifting anything of this magnitude. For the first time, historians were forced to confront a distressing possibility: that the explanation they had trusted for generations was not evidence-based, but assumption-based. According to internal reports among the latest research teams, the shift in tone came the moment measurements were run on digital models. The stones, once merely impressive to the human eye, became scientifically indefensible under the Roman narrative. As experts watched the data appear on screens, weights, quarry distances, terrain slope, rope capacity, soil pressure, joint stress tolerance, silence fell across the room. The numbers did not care about history. They simply refused to comply. And in that silence, a realization settled in the air like dust. Baalbek did not merely challenge the timeline, it broke it. From that moment on, Baalbek stopped being a site that scholars explained and became a site scholars feared to question. Because a single truth now hovered above the limestone blocks, waiting for someone brave enough to say it out loud. If the Romans did not cut the stones, if they did not transport them, if they did not align them, then who did? The AI that saw what humans missed. As Baalbek continued to resist traditional explanations, the research team realized that human analysis alone was no longer enough. Their training, their expectations, and their historical biases were shaping what they allowed themselves to see. Every time the evidence disagreed with accepted narratives, someone suggested measurement errors, misinterpretation, or missing context. But the contradictions were growing too heavy to ignore. The stones carried no patience for excuses. And so, reluctantly, the team turned to something that would not hesitate, would not speculate, and would not protect the beliefs of the past. They turned to a machine, a pattern recognition AI, originally designed for forensic stone studies and advanced engineering research, became the tool chosen to reopen Baalbek's story. It had already proven itself on Roman bridges, Mayan pyramids, and ancient Chinese foundations. It studied microscopic signatures in metal, interpreted radar scans, and compared geometry against millennia-long sky models. But at Baalbek, its task was unprecedented. It was instructed to forget history, forget Rome, forget assumptions. Its only job was to treat the site as a raw puzzle of physics, geology, weathering, erosion, and measurable fact. According to internal notes, the researchers insisted that every file be fed into the AI exactly as it had been collected. Photographs without labeling, quarry soil tests without commentary, laser measurements without historical interpretation. They feared that if they added their theories, the machine might bend toward human expectations. For once, the goal was clarity, whatever the cost. The system studied the material in stages. It analyzed tool marks first, then construction geometry, then ground structure, then sky orientation. It combined all of its results into a single merged analysis, and when the final model appeared, the atmosphere in the room changed completely. According to several who witnessed it, silence filled the laboratory with a tension so thick it felt physical, because the first major contradiction appeared without hesitation. The foundational megaliths did not match Roman engineering tradition. Not only did the AI detect no Roman iron chisel signatures, it detected no Bronze Age or Iron Age hand tool rhythm at all. The surfaces were too uniform, the cuts were too smooth, the angles were too precise and too consistent. The stones behaved mathematically, as though whatever shaped them did so using a system that understood consistency the way a machine does, not a hammer. The system went further. It identified placement patterns the Romans never used, calculated joint tolerances that did not appear in any classical construction, and then pointed toward a sky alignment model that belonged to an era thousands of years older than Rome. In that moment, something inside the accepted story snapped. Several researchers reportedly demanded that the file be rerun. Others insisted the program had malfunctioned. But when the system repeated the same conclusion, something undeniable hung in the air. The foundational platform at Baalbek was non-Roman. It did not belong to any known classical civilization. And, in the eyes of science, a narrative that had stood for nearly 2 centuries collapsed in seconds. The question that echoed through the minds of the team was simple, yet terrifying in scale. If the Romans inherited Baalbek, then who lay beneath the inheritance? To answer that, they returned to the evidence. They looked again at the stones, not with the eyes of history, but with the eyes of a crime scene investigator. And what they found next pushed the mystery even deeper. Tool marks from a lost engineering system. When the AI ruled out Roman origin, the team expected the next phase to offer clarity. Instead, it turned Baalbek into an even greater enigma. The stones were examined under microscopes so sensitive that even the slightest vibration could distort results. Under high magnification, the cuts revealed something astonishing. They were not the irregular fractures that chisels create. They were thin, smooth, unnaturally consistent grooves. Channel widths remained uniform for entire lengths. Depth did not fluctuate. The edges curved with controlled geometry. These were not the scars of human hands. They were the fingerprints of a system capable of sustaining constant pressure without fatigue. The AI cross-referenced every known tool pattern in its database. It compared the marks to Roman chisels, Phoenician wedges, Assyrian picks, Neolithic pounding stones, and even the sharp-edged copper blades used in early Mediterranean quarries. None matched. The closest similarity the AI could find was industrial cutting technology used in modern times. Flowing water carrying abrasive particles that grind stone along a controlled path. Water-guided cutting, something we did not invent until the modern era, appeared to have a ghost-like presence inside the limestone of Baalbek. Chemical residue analysis brought even more discomfort. Embedded in the microscopic channels were traces of quartz sand and corundum, minerals harder than limestone, capable of slicing it when carried through water. These materials were not local to Baalbek. They would have had to be imported deliberately, which meant someone, in a time we do not recognize, transported industrial-grade abrasive materials to the quarry. And that implies planning, coordination, technology, knowledge. Then came the quarry floor analysis. The AI revealed fracture signatures consistent with freeze and thaw extraction. Water poured into carved trenches around a stone block, left to freeze, and expanding ice pushing the block free. Evidence showed narrow channels carved under blocks precisely for water flow. Such techniques exist in prehistoric Scandinavian quarries and early Chinese mining, but never at any documented scale capable of shaping blocks of hundreds of tons. The theory now on the table was unthinkable to anyone bound by traditional timelines. Someone at Baalbek used multi-stage engineered cutting, combining controlled water flow, abrasive materials, and freeze-assisted separation, to create stones so large that even modern machinery struggles to conceptualize them. It was at this point that fear replaced debate. Because while scholars could argue about chisels and labor forces, they could not argue with physics. If the cutting technology did not belong to the Romans, and it did not belong to any known ancient culture, then the only explanation left was the one academia refuses to speak: a lost civilization network and the question that shakes time. With the stones now understood to have been cut using methods that defy the technological ceiling of their supposed era, the research team was compelled to confront the next and perhaps most terrifying question of them all. How were these stones moved? Because cutting is one miracle, but movement is another entirely. And if the cutting was already beyond Rome, the transport threatened to sink everything academia once believed beneath a tidal wave of contradiction.
Furthermore, the different construction methods evident at Baalbek, ranging from the finely crafted megalithic stones at the base to the more rudimentary stonework of the Roman structures,
the AI began its transport analysis with ruthless precision. The team was determined to be as fair as possible, feeding the system every advantage: ideal climate, perfectly organized labor, maximum rope quality, ideal soil traction. They assumed best-case scenarios because they wanted a chance, any chance, for human muscle and wooden rollers to succeed. But brute force has limits, and Baalbek's stones did not care about fairness. The AI simulated thousands of variations. It altered slope, changed rope diameter, stacked rollers in layers, lubricated surfaces, redesigned sledges, staggered manpower, shifted angles, tested friction coefficients using historical climate estimates, and modified terrain models in ways that bent toward optimism. Every attempt, whether using rollers, ropes, sledges, or manpower, failed, often catastrophically. Wooden rollers were crushed almost instantly, even when layered in triple sets and constantly replaced. The pressure of an 800-ton block flattened them like twigs under a boulder. Rope strength was laughably insufficient. The AI calculated that to pull even one of the middle-sized blocks, the rope would need to be thicker than a human torso. And even then, the force needed would require more than 30,000 men surrounding a block that physically could not fit 30,000 bodies around it. Even if the ancient world had armies of that number, the geometry alone made it impossible. The AI labeled that scenario simply non-viable. But perhaps the most unsettling discovery was not that known methods failed. It was that unknown techniques seemed implied. The AI proposed a hypothetical model, not because it understood the past, but because the physics demanded it. It suggested that if someone intentionally reshaped terrain, constructed smooth, engineered pathways, and used platforms that redistributed weight, movement might become theoretically possible. But that model required survey-grade engineering, long-distance planning, and material science far beyond what the Roman world or any neighboring culture recorded. The team stared at glowing numbers on screens and realized, with an almost paralyzing discomfort, that Baalbek's stones are not something ancient people struggled to move. They are something someone once understood how to move. Something someone once had a method for. Something someone once found normal. Which means the real question is not How did the ancients move them? But what knowledge have we lost?
Baalbek, whose Semitic name betrays its remote origins, was in fact a very ancient Phoenician place of worship. Dedicated to the Heliopolitan triad of Jupiter, Venus and Mercury, there is evidence of the astonishing survival of local deities in the Great Temple.
The AI shifted next to astronomical alignment, because stones of this magnitude are rarely placed arbitrarily. Civilizations that move mountains do so with purpose. The AI overlaid the platform orientation with thousands of years of sky movement, accounting for axial precession, Earth's slow wobble that changes the position of stars over millennia. When it projected the alignment backward, farther than Roman time, farther than Bronze Age records, farther even than the earliest recorded civilizations, it pinpointed a match. Baalbek's megalithic platform aligned perfectly with the summer solstice sunrise, but not for Roman time, not even close. It aligned around 7,000 to 9,000 years before the Common Era. If that date holds even partially true, then someone long before Mesopotamia, before Egypt, before Sumer, before what our textbooks call the beginning of civilization, possessed astronomical knowledge detailed enough to track the sun across thousands of years, survey-grade geometry accurate enough to design a platform aligned to that celestial event, and engineering capability powerful enough to place stones weighing more than air carriers onto bedrock with millimeter precision. That realization broke something psychological in the room. Because facts may be debated, but once you see numbers aligned to a sky older than civilization, denial becomes an act of fear. The AI then paired astronomical alignment with ground-penetrating radar. It created a three-dimensional map of bedrock strength beneath the trilithon. When it overlaid each stone's footprint over the strongest rock zones, the pattern was chillingly exact. Every stone sat on the strongest possible location, some positioned mere inches from weak fracture zones. This level of geological precision meant the builders did not simply place stones on ground, they read the ground. They knew where fractures lay, where soil would compress, where stone would endure. They understood Earth the way modern civil engineers do. That kind of decision-making is not accidental. It is structural intelligence. And then came the stones themselves. An 800-ton block is already beyond belief. But near the quarry lies the stone of the pregnant woman, estimated at 1,000 tons, and below that, identified only in a 2014 survey and rechecked through digital modeling, a block estimated at 1,650 tons. A stone so large that even modern cranes would tremble in its presence. It was carved. It was shaped. It was almost ready to move. But it never left the quarry. Was it abandoned because the builders vanished? Did disaster strike? Did someone interrupt a civilization in the middle of its work, leaving their final signature unfinished, a stone waiting to speak through time? Once the AI completed its analysis at Baalbek, the project was meant to conclude. But curiosity, an invisible force, perhaps older than the stones themselves, drove the researchers to take one more step. They asked the machine to compare Baalbek's data to other sites, not expecting anything significant. The AI compared tool marks, astronomical alignments, joint geometry, quarry fracture signatures, drainage engineering, bedrock footprint logic, measurement ratios, and what the machine returned was not a match, not a coincidence, but a network. Göbekli Tepe, Nabta Playa, Jericho's earliest strata, the Maltese temples, Caucasus dolmens, pre-dynastic Egyptian foundation layers. In all of them, scattered across continents and ages, we believe disconnected. Fragments of the same engineering mind appear. tool patterns, geometry logic, bedrock reading, sky alignment to eras no culture should have known. Freeze-fracture quarry signatures, as though someone, some knowledge, some civilization once existed that did not rise and fall in a single place, but spread like a shadow across Earth long before our earliest written memory. And then vanished. No texts remain, no tools remain, no stories remain, except stone. Stone that survives when everything else returns to dust. The researchers who witnessed this conclusion describe a strange silence. Not the silence of satisfaction, but the silence of standing at the edge of a cliff, staring into a darkness where truth might dwell. Because if knowledge this advanced once existed and disappeared, then what are we? Are we the pinnacle of human history, or the aftermath of something greater? If you want to keep uncovering what history tried to bury, like this video, subscribe and turn on notifications, because the next discovery might not just challenge history, it might destroy it.